Okay. Here we are. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of the Road Show, the Bookish Road Trip Road Show. I'm Lee Bukowski, your host. I am the author of the fiction novel, A Week of Warm Weather. Hopefully you'll check that out. Before we get started, I always like to remind you, if you haven't done so already, viewers, if you would allow StreamYard permission to access your Facebook name. If you don't do that, when you're making comments or entering into the chat, you'll just come up as Facebook user, and we want to know who you are. And so you want to allow StreamYard permission to that. Okay, so I'm really looking forward to this episode. So this is the Launchpad, the countdown to publishing your book, which I have right here. A few months ago, we did this is the second book in the 3-book series, writing your book, publishing your book, and marketing your book. So I'm very excited about this episode. We have with us 4 of the contributors to the book, who I will introduce now. We have Robb Grindstaff. Robb's career in the newspaper business took him from small southern towns to DC and 5 years in Tokyo. He's published 4 novels with Evolved Publishing, including one he's going to tell us about at the end of the episode, an award-winning book called Slade. And he's a freelance fiction editor, a sought-after fiction editor. I was reading about you, Robb, with clients from all around the world. He's a writing coach. He's a writing instructor. And in fact, he's been gracious enough. He's actually in Wisconsin teaching writing workshops at a retreat this week. So he's joining us on his lunch hour. So Robb, we really appreciate that. It's great to meet you.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
We have Sarah Bullen. She's a literary agent. Sarah is a multi-published author, an international writing coach and literary agent. She represents authors of nonfiction, celebrity, and memoir. She founded The Writing Room and Kent Literary. You have had over 180 books published by writers that you've mentored. That's amazing. And she's been leading international writing retreats and adventures for the past decade. And poor Sarah is in Greece for the entire month of June.
Oh.
Let's all pity her. That's a shame.
It's a tough life, I tell you, Lee, but somebody has to be here.
Someone's got to do it. Thank you, Sarah, so much for joining us today. Stephanie Larkin also. Stephanie is in Hawaii, poor thing.
A rough life, terrible.
I'm telling you, you guys, it's really, I'm so grateful that you are joining us, but jealous of where you are. So Stephanie is a publisher. She is the head penguin. I love that. You're the head penguin of Red Penguin Books, which is an independent, publishing company, which you've been doing that for over 15 years. You're the author of several books on writing and publishing, as well as a ghostwriter of many others. You teach marketing at the college level. You host several television shows and podcasts. Stephanie, I was reading your motto, changing lives one book at a time. I love that. Welcome from Hawaii.
Thank you.
And we have Natalie Obando, who's a literary publicist for nearly 2 decades. She's worked in the world of books. She's the founder of Do Good Public Relations Group, which is a literary PR firm that helps authors and publishers connect with their perfect reader through strategic, social, good-based campaigns. I love that. You are the national president of Women's National Book Association. You oversee all chapters across the nation, as well as national programs that help authors and publishers promote their work and drive equity in publishing. And welcome to you, Natalie. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm happy to be here from home with my dog.
I'm glad I'm not the only one just boring at home, doing my thing. But... Okay, so this book, as I said, it is the second in this 3-book series, and so you're talking to writers in this book whose goal is publication. This is something very near and dear to me, as the author of my book debut just came out last June. And I had no idea all that is involved in publishing a book, that this whole world of publishing, I think, oh, okay, I finally made the decision. I'll write a book. I'll send it off. Somebody will publish it. I don't know where that happens, but somebody will publish it and people will buy it and read it. Simple, right? Not at all. And so I had a lot to learn about. There's so many paths to publication. And just, this book really focuses on helping writers know, first of all, knowing what their goals are, and then being able to access that path of publication that's right for them, because certainly not everybody is going to take that the journey in the same way. So let's start with, Robb, let's start with you.
Okay.
So you're a writer and you're an editor, and it's so funny because also as an English teacher, I tend to, and I'm not that writer. I love how you say you don't want to be that writer who says, oh, I don't need an editor. My grammar is perfect. I don't need an editor. And I think it's weird because a lot of people almost think of it as insulting to suggest that you need an editor, right? Because you've gone over it 100 times and you say, well, do you have an editor? Well, I gave it to my mother and she said it's the best thing she's ever written in her entire life. So that's fine. So your chapter really focuses on, and I love you mentioned that it's really a relationship that you get into with an editor, and really you need to be comfortable with your editor. So talk to us a little bit about, first of all, what are the different types of editing? Because I think people sometimes think editing is just, oh, you missed a comma here, or this sentence could be better, and certainly that's not the case. So talk to us a little bit about the different types of edits that a novel might go through.
Okay, and again, thanks for having me here. And the different types of editing depend on where you're at in the process. We'll kind of start at the beginning and go through different levels of editing, different styles. And depends on what the writer needs, where they're at in their career as a writer. But let's say you're writing your first novel and you're halfway through and you got a great idea for a story and a character, and you're halfway into the story and realize you're struggling with, okay, I've read novels all my life. How do I actually write one? You might look for a writing coach, somebody that comes along beside you, reads what you've got. You talk to them back and forth about, what your story goals are, and they can provide some training, some instruction, some ideas and suggestions, get you moving again towards finishing that first draft, and maybe all the way through the first draft, and then look at the overall piece and, okay, what do we need to do from here? Other times you may have finished your first draft, or maybe you've revised it. It's your second or third draft, and you're like, I'm just not sure this is ready. I feel like something's missing. And you might hire an editor to do an overall analysis or critique, where an editor reads your whole book and then gives you a report, and maybe, phone calls and emails back and forth on, where the book is, the plot's falling down a little bit. There's not enough tension here. You're not developed, your main character's not developed enough, and can give you feedback, not only on, what's not working, but what is working, and how to improve it. Not just, hey, that part sucks. It's here's what to do about it, or here are some suggestions, or let's talk about this, to help you bring that to a final draft that you're ready to start submitting. What I think a lot of people think of when you think of working with an editor is the line editing. And most editors, I know I do, when I do line editing, it's everything. It's, that missing comma, that missing word, sentence structure, this paragraph doesn't make sense, this scene maybe doesn't need to be there, or it feels like you skipped a scene here, you wrote a paragraph when that could be really interesting to build that out into a full scene. So it's a little bit of the analysis and critique, but a line-by-line detailed edit of everything. And then once you're all done with that, there's a final proofread, which is just looking at, did we miss anything? Are there any commas missing, words missing, typos? Because in all the line editing process and the back and forth, guess what? New typos, new mistakes can get introduced. So it's like a final polish. And then if you get a publishing contract with a company, guess what? They're going to assign an editor to you to do it all over again. And if you're self-publishing or independent publishing, there isn't a publishing company other than you. So you want to make sure you have worked with an editor to make that book professional and make it as good as possible.
It's so interesting. I guess I never really thought about it, that you could hire an editor in the middle of, so like you're writing a novel and you're stuck and you think, oh my gosh, I need some coaching. You know, that's really interesting. I never really thought about it that way. I tend to think of it more, you know, kind of editing at the end. That's interesting. So do you edit differently if you're working, if the writer's self-publishing versus maybe going to try to query an agent, do you edit differently? Do you coach them differently? How does that work?
If they plan on submitting to a literary agent, what we want there is a finished manuscript where the story holds together and the writing is polished, because you want to grab that literary agent's attention and make them want to represent you and your book to publishing companies. Whereas if you are self-publishing, you know, then your editor is the final step before you inflict your work on readers. So there may be several different, editing passes. Or if you're working with a literary agent, we want to make sure it's good enough, no obvious errors or problems with the story. But the literary agent may have editing suggestions, and then once a publishing company, if and when a publishing company offers a contract, they're going to edit it again. So we still want to make it as good as possible, but you can edit a book so many times that you never finish. At some point you have to say, this baby is done. Let's get it out in the world, rather than just, let's edit it again. Let's try and make this a little better. Let's try to make that a little better. You can do that until you've edited the voice out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've actually spoken to authors who said they have felt that way, that they felt like the editing was just going on endlessly, and just kind of that if they don't just say, listen, okay, this is as done as it's going to be, you could do that forever. So let's move on for a second, Sarah, because Robb talked about if you're going to query a literary agent. I will. I queried agents for up to a full year, which in the book I felt better reading that you said, because I think, it struck me when you said in the book how sometimes people will query, they'll send off 3 letters and get their first rejection and then stick that manuscript in a drawer or whatever and think that's it. I'm a failure at this. I'm not going to continue. Again, I was very surprised at the length of time that it took. And like I said, I queried probably over 100 agents for a full year. I got some lovely, lovely rejections. Some of them were so kind, I wanted to frame them and display them. But I felt like the feedback was valuable enough. I wasn't getting the, this is garbage, no one will publish it. It was more like they were asking for chapters, but then it was like, maybe this isn't right for me. I mean, some of them were flat out no's, but I was trying really to heed the feedback. I ended up going with an indie publishing company, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later. But so what are agents looking for? In your chapter is great, but so tell us a little bit about what agents are looking for in a novel submission.
So I like to actually group together agents and traditional publishers, because there are many traditional publishers who do not accept unagented submissions, but many do. So the first thing when you are looking to query or an agent or a publisher, the very first thing is to do your research and come up with your hit list of the ones who work in your genre, okay? Which, if you don't know what that is, you need to go back to the drawing board. So I don't currently represent novels, but I have in the past in the UK, in the US. So when you start to send out queries for a novel, the first assumption is that you have a polished manuscript, that you as an author have really got it to the best place you can get it, and you feel it's kind of solid and good. On the most obvious level, what we are looking for is a good query letter. Okay, the very first thing, and I'm going to get a lot of query letters in my inbox. Often it'll first go to my assistant, and she'll be the first level, and she'll send very quickly if it's in the wrong genre. if they're sending me a young adult, if they're sending me a children's book, if they're sending me a sci-fi, and I'm only working crime and romance, it's not even going to get past level 1, right? My assistant's just going to send our stock standard, thank you so very much, but we don't represent this genre. Best of luck with your search. However, if it's just in the right genre, she's going to bank those. And then at some point, and I usually do it about every 2 months, I'm going to take a look at the authors she's gathered as a little package. And this is probably standard of most publishers and agents. In fact, most publishers kind of every 3 months will look at what their assistant has gathered. On the odd time, there's something so exciting that she'll run across and say, Sarah, I've got a fantastic book. I know it's just up your alley. It's investigative, or it's current affairs, or it's whatever it may be. And so when I get my novel submissions, I'm going to first off the bat look at the query letter. Is this a well-crafted back cover blurb? Is it grabbing my attention? Is there a strong protagonist? Is there a story hook? And is there a hero's journey? Without a doubt. Does this person know their genre? Have they read so many of these books they absolutely know the conventions of the genre, the expected scenes in the genre? And do they know what readers who love crime or love romance want in a book? Okay. If I can see that just in the query letter, I'm going to open the synopsis, and then I'm going to take the next step of evaluating a little bit further. In a novel, I'm not that interested in the author. It's not like a nonfiction memoir or a nonfiction book where I'm going to judge it on the author's brand reach. I'm going to make a more value judgment. Oh, they've got a lot of followers. They've got a 20,000 strong email database. They've got 20,000 followers on social media. They're talking at 17 conferences this year, and my brain will start to make a commercial decision around that author. It's not the same in novels. In novels, I'm kind of looking for 2 things. I'm looking for, do I like this protagonist? Have they set up a story here? Is there a story? And is this kind of well written? And by well written, I don't mean perfect English. I mean engaging. Okay, I mean engaging. Bearing in mind that most often I've only got the first 3 chapters. Mm-hmm. So if in those 3 chapters, there's a solid story, there's an engaging protagonist, a hero who's going to have to be tested, he's going to have to be challenged, he's going to have to change and grow, then I'm going to go, and it's within kind of my publishing goals, and it's within my genre, I'm going to say, please send me the rest of your book. And then I'm going to take about 4 months. I may read it, I may pass it on to a second person to read. And if I sign them as an agent, it doesn't mean you have a publishing deal. What that means is that somebody believes in you and they're going to back your book and they're going to try and get you a publishing deal. But I will say that it can take me a good year of pitching to get 1 deal. And that can also be a year of pitching and I don't get a deal. No deal, which has been very often the case. And that can also mean, depending on the reach of your agent and how much they believe in you, is they can also send it to 1-2 people and end up getting a publishing deal. The right people, because they know the market. So that's what we're looking for. We're not really looking at age, although a young author, of course, we know has got quite a few books in them. And we're just looking for story.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's and I noticed when I was querying agents, they have very specific criteria and they're different. So, some they're looking for certain things. They will tell you what they're looking for in your query letter, which is helpful. And so I'm guessing, there are probably authors, and Sarah, you can answer this, who just ignore that and say, you know what, I have such a great, I know how I'm going to write this letter, and I don't care that they ask for 3 comparable titles and don't want this and do want this. I'm going to do this letter my way. Do you get that? Is that like an immediate turnoff?
Yeah. I'll tell you what is an immediate turnoff. Immediate turnoff is a lot of swearing in the beginning of a book. That's the first thing I just won't read further. And many agents and authors will tell you the exact same thing. That's kind of the only turnoff. Most often, there's a level of respect that this person has invested a minimum of a year of their life, probably 5 years, pouring their soul onto this page. I'm going to open it. I'm going to take a look at it. And when I reply, I'm going to give them enough to work with. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to give them a bit of feedback. But absolutely, people don't necessarily understand that publishing is a commercial business, and that we don't just, when we move into the realm of author, we're not writing to tell our story and share with our family and friends. We need to understand it's a business, and this is the business side of publishing. Mm-hmm. Writing is a soulful creative process, and getting published is not. It's methodical, it's consistent, it's knowing your market, it's working with feedback. So there's not much that's going to make me think, oh, I'll just send a very quick rejection.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to pivot now to Stephanie, because what Sarah was just saying about a business, you say in the book that publishing a book is opting into an agreement that the author is going to agree that you're going to be running a business, because it is a business. Your chapter, I love. So I love that. I love how you start out saying it's not realistic to write a book with the sole purpose of making a lot of money. My new favorite thing, if I ever do speak to groups, I say, I think I have finally figured out how to make a small fortune publishing a book. You start with a large fortune. And it always gets a laugh from people who know, because it is, I do appreciate it in the book where you mentioned that it's heartbreaking. Obviously people can make money as writers. They do. Many people do. It's possible. But you talk about that journey being a marathon, not a sprint. I've had many authors who've been so gracious in helping and mentoring me, who've come before me, who they've likened the book to a quart of, or it's not a quart of milk. It doesn't expire. And so there are ways to, keep it going and maybe make money. But if you write a book saying, I'm going to write a book and I'm just going to make a ton of money right off the bat, you're bound to be kind of disappointed. So what do you feel, what should the goal, and you talk about this in the book, other than making money, what should the author's goal be for writing a book?
Well, there are a million people and a million reasons for writing a book. And I love when people are clear on what their goal is. I'll have 92-year-olds who are writing a book as a legacy project to leave to their grandchildren. I adore those books. Yeah. And one of the reasons that we are independent is so that we don't have to say no on the basis of the same things that Sarah is saying no on. I'm much more about reason. What is your why? That's a fabulous why. That is a really fabulous why that no traditional publisher is going to touch, because it's going to sell approximately 12 books. But those 12 books are going to be cherished. Absolutely cherished. And that to me is huge. But I also have on the other end of the spectrum, people who are either fiction writers with a fabulous, fabulous story, who they need to get to their 5th book before they, learn how to kind of tell it better. But they really have amazing stuff going on. And they want this to be kind of their new hobby. And maybe one day it will take flight. I have a million people who are in business or speakers or coaches that book is absolutely, I'm so glad you said my buzz with the line there, changing lives one book at a time. That book, the first life to be changed, and the most important to me, is the author's life. The author is a totally different person, whether the book sells 12 copies or 12,000. When you hold a book in your hand and your name is on the cover, you are transformed as a person. That's true. Whether it's a business owner and, they're giving these books away, but they're getting clients left and right because of that. That's amazing stuff. And it has nothing to do with making money from selling the book. They made money because they wrote the book. So that's why I said there's lots of different reasons. Lee, one of my biggest worries in life as a publisher is that I meet people at the beginning and we try to crystallize their goals. And then, unfortunately, this happens so often. The book gets published. We're excited. We're drinking champagne. It's all exciting. And then about, 2 weeks later, they call me up and say, so how much money have I made? And I think that wasn't the point. Like, we're missing the point here. And I hate when someone's goals shift. And very often, because I speak to future writers, I equate writing to like golf. I play golf. I am terrible at golf. I am just terrible. But I took it up because, once or twice a year, my husband and I ride around in a golf cart and we sip iced tea and we whack a ball. And I've spent thousands of dollars on my clubs, my shoes. I mean, green fees are just crazy. But I am not expecting in any way, shape, or form to win the Masters. That is nothing on my list. But you know what happens, Lee? Once in a while, when you hit a ball really well, because any of you who have ever golfed, once in a while, you hit it and it sails. And you think for 1 second, I could do this professionally. But you know what? You can't. And publishing is a little bit like that. There are some people, we have we publish about 120 books a year, and some of them, whoosh. I love seeing those numbers. I love that. But others, that wasn't the point. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that all of the authors I work with are riding around in their golf carts and they're happy. I want them to be happy in their golf cart, and I want them to be fulfilled. And I want people to, and it's not a matter of having small goals or big goals. It's not like that. I want you to know what the goal was.
Right.
Because I want our authors to feel like I fulfilled my goal. I don't want them to feel like, oh, I didn't sell 10,000 books. Because I'm thinking, we knew you were never going to sell 10,000 books. And that's okay. That's okay. So, I love that Sarah is so clear about the fact that it's not just whether the author was good. Honestly, it's that the author is in business and that agent is running a business and the publisher is running a business. And the fact of all of those stars aligning at the same time is kind of wow. But it's not what everybody gets. And that's okay.
Right.
I want that to be okay for people. And Lee, I'm so happy that you found a path that works for you. And I'm so excited. And one of the reasons I was thrilled about this book is that there's like 5 or 7 different paths outlined. And there's even more because there's a path for everyone. But traditional publishing is not for everyone. Indie publishing is not for everyone. Right. Small press publishing is not for everyone. There's a path for everyone. And that's so exciting because I honestly think that everyone who wants to be published should, but not on the same path as everybody else.
Yes. I think that's true. I know just from kind of now being in this world for the last couple of years, I think that's so true that if you want to be published, you can. But as you said, you have to set realistic goals and stick to those goals. And like you said, if halfway through you're disappointed because you didn't reach a goal that you said wasn't your goal in the first place, everybody turns out disappointed. And I had no idea. I didn't know what indie publishing was. So Natalie, we'll talk about this when we get to the publicity part. I didn't know that. I thought you either you queried agents and one of the big 5 picked up your book, or you self-published and you sold the books out of the trunk of your car and to your friends, and there was nothing in between. And so I think you're so right. I loved in the introduction that you wrote, that you shared, that long ago I don't want to say it and botch it, but tell us please, if you would, about your stepfather's memoir.
Sure. When I had decided that we would go into publishing, we'd been in business doing ebooks and all sorts of marketing for years, and decided to venture into print as well. And I kind of got to that point. I had some clients. We were about to publish our first books. And I'm so thankful that I kind of put the brakes on it and realized that whatever book was going to be first, it mattered. I didn't want it just to be some random client, with all due respect. And my mother had the foresight, when my beloved stepfather was suffering Alzheimer's, to sit with him and ask him questions and write things down. And when he had passed, she presented me with all of this that I, of course, in my grief, put in a drawer. But as I got to the finish line, I said, that's the story. And took it out. We edited, dusted it off. It's a huge, Rob, you could probably cut, 100 pages out of it, but it's okay. It's like 450 pages in teeny tiny type, but it is the most important book I've ever published. We've literally, sold 12 copies besides the 20 that I, bought myself. And I often say, if my house were on fire, that line, what would you save first? And I would save that book, but I don't have to. It's on Amazon. Yeah. and it is such a gift to me and my family. My children and their children who will never know him can read that book. I learned things reading that book, by the way.
I'm sure you did.
I learned a lot reading that book, and it's a gift to my family. And it's so important to know. It didn't sell 1 million copies. Lee, funny story though, we have had calls, people who have bought it based just on the keywords or things that it says in the description. People have called or emailed and said, wait a minute, I was in that platoon in World War II, or my grandfather was, thank you so much for writing this, publishing this, because my grandfather didn't publish this. Oh. But I feel like now I know what it was like in North Africa, or growing up on the Upper East Side, or doing like people whose relatives were there. Right. Maybe their paths crossed, maybe they didn't, but they feel like they're reading their own story. And that has been really a gift. And as I said, not millions of copies. No. I haven't handed it off to Natalie to push with the publicity, because it's a personal project, and that's fine.
Exactly. And what could be, there's nothing that could be more important than that. And I think it's wonderful that you share that story, because I think it really, people think, oh yeah, right. That's just something, it's not all about making money. That's just something people say so we don't go crazy. But that really, really drives home the point of what is the goal and what is important. So I think it's lovely that you share. That's awesome. So Natalie, you are a publicist. Your chapter deals with typically marginalized communities in publishing, and I read your chapter with so much interest. How just in this world really is very, very sort of straightforward, white, cisgendered, very, and so how I like how you write about how, first of all, what the publishing world is doing to change that, and also how people like me from non-marginalized communities can help to bring about change and create equity. So tell us about your chapter first, because it's so interesting.
Yeah, so I wrote 2 chapters. So I did the Authentic Voices chapter, and that really highlights, where we are in publishing in terms of getting diverse voices into the fold and creating equity in publishing, and where it kind of started, which really started happening, during the Black Lives Matter movement, because people were getting called out, and publishing eventually got called out, and we started digging deep into statistics about works that are out there and what people want to read and what's available to readers, and we saw that the statistics really showcased a huge discrepancy on who was having a voice in publishing. And so but the chapter really, I think, echoes the work that I've done with Women's National Book Association. We created a program called Authentic Voices, and it really stemmed to, or started to try and fill in that gap that there is in publishing. Because when you really break down what is happening is that these typically marginalized communities are lacking the resources when it, comes straight down to like education, or creative writing resources, things like that in the community. So we provide through Women's National Book Association and Women of Color Writers a program for BIPOC women or those who identify as female. And we put them through I call it a masterclass in publishing, because everything you all are saying is really true. So we do creative writing, and then we do editing course, and we pair them with an editor mentor, and we have an editing instructor. And then after that's finished, we take those submissions, so their work, we hand it off to the publisher, and we go through a whole business side of publishing with them. So we go through setting up your online platform, social media, website, branding yourself, creating your bio, because really, I mean, this is just, it's such an integral part of being an author. Like, you can't even, not teach that, because it's so important. Especially for marginalized writers, because we tend to have to always do things a little bit better to get the same type of recognition that non-marginalized writers get. So we're really emphasizing the business part of publishing. And, the people who have come out of this program have gone on to work for poets and writers, gotten agents, worked at literary agencies. We teach them how to query both fiction and nonfiction. We pair them with, or we introduce them to agents. I mean, it's really kind of just like a deep master class of publishing, and it's been really successful. I think that as allies, so non-BIPOC writers, there's so much that you can do. Specifically, one of my main things is support marginalized writers, support those stories. I think it's really important for all of us to really kind of take a look at the stories that are being published, because it's really hard to get these stories published. I mean, I started recently working with a literary agency, and because I've basically like fostered these authors, I'm like, let me take it one step further and let me try to get your stories published. And so I meet with acquisitions editors, and while they are looking for diverse stories, they still have to fit into like a specific category. And so, there's still a lot of gatekeeping going on. But I think that what we're seeing is once those stories are published, they get a lot of support from their own communities. And as allies, you can support them by buying their book. And also just like as humans, right? I think it's just a great idea to learn about other cultures and other stories from authentic voices. So it's been a really great program. I love that people are really interested in creating that equity. Working with, everyone has been just really great in terms of like, informing them what's going on and having them ask more questions about like how to help. And, it's really nice to see that as BIPOC writers, there is such a network of allies and a community of allies. And so that's been really helpful with Authentic Voices.
Yeah, I did one part of and I know I'll botch it, but one part of your chapter that struck me that I thought, wow, this is so true. You said that often, and hopefully that's getting better now, but when these stories are told by white people, so they focus more on the hardships of people in these communities rather than the authentic journey, the authentic experience. Because they can have that authentic experience. So I love that. I love how you talk about how people from non-marginalized communities can help toward this effort. So you, as a publicist, you said another thing in your chapter that I thought was so funny, how you always thought you'd be a writer, but then, people who know more, like our parents, when we say, I don't know if there's a little girl in my age group who, as a little girl, didn't want to be, and they were called stewardesses at the time. We're going to be a stewardess. That's a great way to fly around and see the world. and then your parents say, no, you're not going to do that. But I
Yeah.
love when you said when you graduated from college that I think you said you meshed the three things and that you were really good at: gossip, writing, and books, and then you became a publicist.
Yeah.
And I would say that you knew what was going on. Talk to us a little bit about the importance. I also did hire a publicist. My publisher was Brooke Warner with She Writes, who has a chapter in the book, and they have an in-house publicity team, and that's who I hired. And it's expensive, but my feeling was I was brand new. I didn't really have a social media presence. I was a teacher, so it was kind of frowned upon to be, and I'm not the kind of person to be on social media telling everyone, hey, I made chicken soup today, whatever. Not that, some people are. I don't really have anything that interesting, but I really thought if I dropped the ball at this point, I really felt as though it was important to, and maybe all of you can speak to this in the different roles. What role, how important do you think it is? And not everybody can do it, but I did. So talk to us a little bit about, what goes into the decision of having a publicist or opting not to.
So, it really boils down to how much work you want to do, right? Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, the journey doesn't end with writing the book and getting published. It really keeps going. And so whenever I work with clients, I ask them the same thing Stephanie does, which is, what's your goal? And if they say I want to be a New York Times bestseller and they're not with a traditional publisher, I'll typically say I can't do that. Or they want to get in the New York Times and they're not with a traditional Big Five publisher. It's hard. There's thousands, more than 5,000 books being published a day. Thousands of books being published a day. And it's one of those things where you have to know that there's going to be work that goes into it. So your publicist can't do it all. I am there to connect you with the right people. I'm there to set things up for you. But at the end of everything, it really boils down to you as an author, what you're willing to share, and what you want your platform to be. Is this something that you see long term? Are you building a platform for future books? Because publicity is kind of like a marathon. It's not a sprint. I can get you book reviews right away. I can get you a couple of interviews right away, but that's not going to sell copies. It really isn't. Mm-hmm. We've had authors on Oprah Daily. We've had authors in the New York Times. Doesn't really move the number, so yeah. And I would say that, what you really have to consider is knowing your niche, and can you really get in front of your niche without a publicist? And if you know how to, great. A lot of nonfiction authors already know how to do that. They already have an established platform. They're already speaking at events, so they might not need a publicist. If you are a fiction writer, novel writer, and you're trying to connect with book clubs, that's something that we can help you do, but you can do that as well. So it really depends as to how much work you want to do. But I always tell people that, even if you hire a publicist, it doesn't mean that you're not doing any work after that. You still have to put in the work. And also you can't hire a publicist forever, right? So you need to know what you have to do long term. But, publicity is fun because I get to connect readers with, their favorite books and stuff. And I get to put together book parties and, author events. And that's always a ton of fun. But the nitty gritty of publicity is I'm basically a salesperson pitching your book to tons of editors, producers, podcasters to get coverage. And a lot of times now it's pay to play. So, again, an author can do that themselves, but really you're just kind of paying for the experience and the work that the publicist is going to do for you. And, to be honest, it's not cheap. So, it it's worth it if you are going to learn from your publicist. If you're going to say, okay, hey, I see that, this is the publicity contract. This is the timeline. Can you tell me how you're going to do this? And having that constant communication and those conversations with your publicist, instead of just being like, hey, I'm going to leave it all to you. Like, when am I going to be in the New York Times? Like, those are two different types of clients.
Right.
And we always love like a collaborative process. And those seem to be the most successful always.
Yeah, you're right. It is definitely, that's what my publicist would, and it was fun. It was a lot of work, but when you're every day, it's like, hey, I got you this. Hey, can you write a blog for this? Hey, this person wants you to, and like you said, I mean, it doesn't always translate to sales and numbers. But I learned a lot from it, which I think is valuable. Sarah, you were saying how many, like on average, so how many in your inbox every day, how many letters do you get?
So, I mean, I've been an agent for some big agencies, and now I have a very small boutique agency.
Okay.
I'm going to say in a month, I probably get about 50.
Oh, okay.
So it's not overwhelming. I mean, we kind of sit and think everyone's writing books. They're not, okay? Right. They're not. And to get the book to the place where it's done and you feel confident and you're going to take the next step, it's a small percentage of people who have the staying power, willpower, actually take all those steps, all that persistence to get to that point of the procedure. So, yeah.
I like when you said, and in the book you say it too, you realize when you get something, that person has been working on that for a minimum of a year. I talk to authors who say, oh, I worked on this book for 20 years. I had the idea and then I did some and then I put it away and then I went back to it. And then, and it's so funny because when I published my book, people, it's funny because when you tell people you're a writer, when I tell people I'm a writer, I should say, I get one of two reactions. The first one is, oh my gosh, that's so cool. The second one is, oh, so you don't work, like you don't have a job. But I meet so many people who say, oh yeah, I'm going to write a book. I'm real busy right now, but I'm going to write a book. And I know what they mean, but they don't know what they mean. And I think, Sarah, what you're saying is not a lot of people have the persistence to really, sit your butt down in the chair and actually do it. And so, I really appreciate how you say, what blood, sweat, and tears has gone into it when you do read. And I love that you don't want to just give a quick no, reject, like no, no, because it feels personal, even though it's not. But that's that's part of your job. I'm sure that's the least pleasant part of your job.
Absolutely. And I just want to echo what Robb said. Get some eyeballs on your book. Into the game. I've had authors come and submit me a book with tears in their eyes, and they've been writing it for 10 years. And I've opened it up and I've gone, but this is an omniscient narrator. This is not viewpoint writing. This is not, so it's little basic things that maybe you don't know.
Right.
So do your first draft, get somebody to look at it, get a developmental editor.
Yes. Robb, do you do your own editing? I mean, I think the general rule is you can't edit your own work.
No, that's
see what you can't possibly read your own work. Like
no.
I always think a reader is going to be the one to say, because exactly what you mean, but the reader is going to be the one to say, wait a minute, this is disconnected, or this doesn't make sense here, or.
Yeah, absolutely. I do not. Well, I do edit my own work, but I'm not the editor of my.
Right. Right.
And it goes to an editor or a team of editors, because you're absolutely right. I know what I meant to say.
Exactly.
I know the images and the characters and the voices that were in my head that I wanted to get down in words. It takes an editor or beta readers or a critique group to say, yeah, you're accomplishing this well, or I'm not getting what you're intending,
right.
Or it's falling apart here, or it's just, it might be interesting in your head, but it's not in mine.
Yeah.
And then even in the, the line editing and the proofreading, I can read something I've written 10 times, and there might be a word missing right in the middle of the sentence. My brain knows it's supposed to be there, so when I read it, my brain fills it in. Right. Hand it off to an editor, and they find all these typos that I'm like, how could I have missed those? But my brain didn't see my own mistakes. if you're a surgeon, you don't want to operate on yourself. If you're a writer, you don't edit yourself.
That's a great analogy. I tell my students that all the time. I teach freshman college students now, and I just say, you need to have another set of eyes on your, because what you said is so true. You can read a sentence 10 times with a word missing, but your brain knows it's supposed to be there, so you don't catch that.
Right.
And Stephanie, I know we can't possibly in a short episode like this go over this, but you do, part of what your chapter does is gets into like you call it the nuts and bolts of where the money, the royalties, the discount, right. I love how you also talk about other ways. I just met with a consultant who kind of reached out to me, she did, and said, hey, I read your book. I really liked it. You're missing a whole market here. You should be contacting these organizations because then you might get some bulk sales, things that like I never even thought of. But your chapter really goes into sort of all the different ways to not only make money, but also spend money, and then also find that balance. And again, it really goes back to, you're all kind of saying, I think the most important thing is know your goals, know your publishing goals. Right. And this book helps whatever your publishing goals are. There's something in this book that's going to help you achieve that. But so that's what it struck me, Stephanie. I know we can't go into it, but you do talk about a lot of, ways to not only make, but spend money publishing a book.
That's very true. I'm glad you keep pointing to the fact that publishing does cost money.
Yeah.
When you asked Natalie about, who should use a publicist, in my head, I was thinking those who can afford a publicist, because it's expensive and publishing is expensive.
Yeah.
But Lee, I'm glad you pointed to that, because too often people think being published means it's on Amazon. And I'm trying to, in a sense, take away a little bit of Amazon's power.
Yeah.
They have grown to become the all-powerful. People don't realize how much money they are taking from your profits.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely want people to realize how much money they are taking, and that there are many, many avenues, including selling them out of the trunk of your car.
Right.
One of my author clients has probably sold about 5 books on Amazon. She has sold over 500 out of the trunk of her car.
That's amazing.
She's amazing. She stops people in the grocery store. Good for her. And let's not forget that that's a viable option, as are a million other things. And I love that you mentioned contacting organizations. Mm-hmm. That would be a really good fit. So many books, fiction as well as nonfiction. Mm-hmm. Please don't think that only nonfiction should connect with organizations. Fiction as well connects very well. We've had books that are, let's say, sexual assault was a major theme in the book. And then they're connecting with, rape crisis centers and places that people will want to be part of that journey. And sometimes reading it in fiction is a lot easier than reading it in nonfiction. Let me tell you that.
That's what this consultant said to me. My book is fiction, but it deals with childhood trauma, abandonment, addiction. And she said, fiction, even though these, people in, let's say, Al-Anon or something like that, she said, your book will, it's nice to read, not nice, but it's to read about someone taking that journey that they've taken. Sure, there's a self-help book, there's a nonfiction book out there for them, but she said to me, reading your book will allow them to take that journey and then sort of, process it, and then maybe go and get the self-help book or whatever it might be. It's just something that I hadn't thought of. And then it was like the day after I met with her, I read this part in your book. I'm like, my gosh, there's got to be something to this. I can't believe we're almost out of time. I want to, again, reiterate that this book, again, there's so many paths to publishing, that we can't possibly cover it in a short hour. But again, knowing your goals, if you are at the point where you're writing a book and your goal is publishing it, this book has something for you, something that's going to help you reach your goals. And so I highly recommend it. What I want to do now is I want you to tell us where we can find you, how we can follow you. You all have such interesting and unique contributions to the book and unique experiences in your own careers. Robb, so tell us, I know you have, if you want to plug any of your books, now's the time. And also tell us where we can find you, how we can follow you. Maybe I'd love to come to one of your workshops.
Okay. You can find me right now at the Novel in Progress workshop in Racine, Wisconsin, here on beautiful Lake Michigan. You can find me on Facebook. My website is robbgrindstaff.com, and my blog, newsletter, whatever it is, whatever you call it these days, is on Substack. It's called a writer's block. It's robbgrindstaff.substack.com.
Okay.
I give writing tips, editing tips, talk about the publishing and writing business, or anything else that I feel like talking about there.
Awesome.
So that's where you can find me.
Great.
I had actually 3 books published last year, but they're all in Amazon, Evolved Publishing's website. But that was one novel that I wrote for 8 years, one novel I wrote in 3 weeks, and then a collection of short stories I'd written over 10 years. So
Wow.
it was just convergence that they all came out at in the same year.
That's amazing. Stephanie, where can we find you?
Sure. You can find me at redpenguinbooks.com, on social media, Instagram, Facebook, etc., at Red Penguin Books, or under my name. Please do connect, because in addition to writing and ghostwriting and publishing, we have a phenomenal anthology program that we accept submissions from authors, poets, and playwrights around the world to be in various anthologies that are generally thematic. I think we have 8 or 10 anthologies in production right now that have open submission. So these anthologies end up being published with anywhere between 30 and 100 submissions, cut down from, wow, we are so fortunate to have, we now have authors on 6 different continents, and I think we're up to about 47 countries represented. So please do visit redpenguinbooks.com. Even if you just have like a little limerick that you want to get out there. We have a
I'm definitely going to connect with you there. So Natalie, where can we find you?
Everywhere. No, I honestly, Women's National Book Association is where I go to for community. So WNBA-books.org. We say books, not balls, because people are always confusing us with the basketball organization.
You know, when I first saw that, I'm not going to lie. When I first saw the acronym, I was like, wait a minute. And I like, oh, okay.
Yeah, when I tell people I'm the president of the WNBA, they look at me and see that I'm 5'2". So, yeah. And same, WNBA_books on Instagram. But we're really active on there. We have a ton of programs that are free to everyone. Membership is only about $45 for the year, for writing classes, publicity classes, connecting with agents, all that good stuff. So
great. That's awesome. Okay. And Sarah, where can we find you?
You can find me at thewritingroom.co.za, or you can Google Sarah Bullen, and I'll probably come up.
And you'll probably come up. Great.
Or you can find me on a Greek island. Or
I was just going to say.
I'm in Tuscany in August. I'm in the island of Lamu in September, and I'm running writing immersions in Cape Town in November. So, one of these wonderful exotic locations.
Oh, you poor thing. That sounds dreadful. Well, thank you so much to all of you. All of your contributions are so valuable. You bring so much. Like I said, these things fly by. I watch the time, and I can't believe that it's almost been an hour. But I want to thank all of you very much for joining me on the road, and good luck and success wish for all of you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.